All right, here we are. This is episode 2 of Now That I Know. It's Cale and Mindy again. This should be fun. We're going to be talking more about Cale today. Last week it was we talked about what I do and how my business works, and today we're going to focus on Cale. So first, I'm just going to kind of let Cale give us a little bit of information about his business, his website, what he does, and then got some questions. So if you want to kick us off and give us a little bit of background, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll do my best. So last week we talked about, hey, Mindy's business origin and what inspired her to come up with her revenue optimization and intelligence, and then the ROI that works.com site that is the product, if you will. And this week we're going to turn that same sort of lens toward me and talk about what I'm bringing to the market and why and where it came from. And so I'll do my best to share with you something that is in constant change. I'm shifting it. In fact, this week I'm going to be tweaking a bit the offers themselves, but that's really not relevant. Uh, my product, if you will, to use Mindy's word, is is the idea here is I want to enable and empower people who are in, let's say, program management, operations, strategy. They're in that place where they are responsible for the outcome of a strategy. They're responsible for delivery, but they're not responsible for the decisions. They're not responsible for all the framework and all the stuff upstream, if you will, that uh, gave them the parameters and the constraints that they're operating under. And so they are constantly worried about falling behind. They're worried about not getting the right decisions from leadership to get objectives met, so forth and so on. And so I've spent the last 15 years, much like Mindy had mentioned for hers, I spent the past 15 years living as a program manager, as a director, as a person responsible for either the people or the systems themselves. I had the same sort of kind of pain points that Mindy had, and I was collecting all this experience and all these workarounds and all these tricks and tips and things that had come together in my own practice, if you will. Um, so I said, look, I we can talk about the origin more here in a minute, Mindy, because I think the story is entertaining and relevant. The point
I think
is
so.
I got it down and I said to myself, hey, how do I want to get this out to other people? Do I want to give it away? Do I want to sell it? Do I want to do some kind of combination in between? And I've been spending the last 6 months, much like you have, refining ROI and how it goes to the market.
Mhm.
I've been doing the same thing with Control Alt Recover. And the
Mhm.
last thing I'll say about that before I turn it back over to you to sort of moderate this
Mhm.
is that name Control Alt Recover kind of came to me as these things often do out of out of the universe, I like to say. Um, started with the concept of, hey, I'm bringing in this concept of recovery and getting things back on track. And I'm like, well, hey, it's like Control Alt Delete, but I'm like, no, it's not like Control Alt Delete because I'm not wanting to reboot. We aren't
Mhm.
necessarily starting over from scratch. We are looking at these programs, these initiatives, these strategies that are off the rails, and we say, let's get them back on the rail. Let's recover them.
Mhm.
And so that sort of that metaphor of Control Alt Delete, from our history using computers every day of our lives for the last many
Mhm.
years, uh, that stuck. And I'm like, well, let's do
Mhm.
Control Alt Recover. Just so
Mhm.
happens, as far as I know, there's no recover key, but that's part of what makes it fun in my mind. So Control Alt Recover came from that perspective. And the last thing I'll say about it is in the documentation, in the offer, in some of the details, I play off that Control, the Alt, and the Recover aspects as part of different steps, different framings, different looks. I really try to have people help them keep the concepts and the frameworks and things in those buckets so it helps them know where they are and how they can navigate all of this complicated stuff. So anyway, if that made any sense at all, I'll be surprised.
It made sense to me, I think. So if I'm looking at it from a high level bird's eye view, I would be thinking that it's something along the lines of what that means is you're gaining control of the chaos. You're putting a stop to whatever has gone off the rails now, and and then you're bringing in a recovery process. So the control alt recover basically means, hey, we're stopping what we're doing now. We're not deleting it. We're stopping it. We're getting it under control, and we're putting in a process of recovery. Is that fair?
That's exactly
Right?
right. Yep.
And
And
so I think it sounds like what happens a lot of times is there's a series of inflection points that people are missing because to kind of speak to the whole universe concept, they're not listening to whatever is speaking to them where something could have been caught, maybe they didn't catch it. Um, do you have some insight on that that you can share? Where
yeah, I
maybe they
think
could
what
have caught
you're
those things?
I'm going to build on what I think you were saying, which is we'd call that pattern recognition for one thing, right? If if my ideal customer is a person again who's been around the block a bit and they know their job, they know their business, they know how to run programs and operations and this kind of thing, but it's just a situation where the patterns have escaped them for whatever reason, or
Mhm.
the environment is what I call hostile, and so they
Mhm.
just never can quite get comfortable for one reason or the other. They can't sit down long enough to pick up those patterns and get them recognized. And so
Mhm.
they wind up, 2, 3 months down the line, getting by the skin of their teeth, and they get to say a quarterly business review with a VP, and the wheels begin to come off the bus because they cannot explain to him or her why the strategy is stuck where it is, how it went off track, what have you, right? So that's exactly right. And it even can go so far back as to environments where they don't have the ability or the permission in some cases to
Mhm.
start at the beginning, when the initiative kicks off or when the program is begins, and just kind of watch for what I call drift, right?
Mhm.
Just do spot checks. Just keep your finger on the pulse of the thing so that you can do everything in your power to be predictive about these
Mhm.
derailings, right?
Yeah.
So I look at it, I try to have equal parts prevention and equal parts recovery for these folks, right? Or at the very least, we get them, they when they reach out to me, they are in a state of panic. Things, if the wheels have fallen off the bus, how do I get the wheels back on? And we get the wheels back on, and then I say, let's prevent the wheels from falling off next time, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. So what are some situations that would cause that panic? Where would a business have to be where they're calling you because they're in a panic, they can't recover on their own, they need Cale's help?
Hmm. Uh, the one that a couple of examples that strike me are, and I'll go back and talk about in LinkedIn and other places. I refer to it as like the decision matrix, right? We've got a
Mhm.
situation where you've got a strategy that gets kicked off, and
Mhm.
the strategy, let's say, is we need to take two completely disparate product offerings and we need to merge them together at the enterprise level because we're confusing the heck out of our customers with this version of the offering and that version of the offering, right? And you've
Right.
lived that experience with a particular
Yeah.
vendor, you know,
Yeah.
and so
Yep. I've seen
that
you
was,
do it, but I just want you to speak to it.
you got it. And so
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to protect the innocent or
Yeah.
protect the guilty, as it were.
Yes.
And so that particular program that I'm alluding to is a very real thing that
Mhm.
happened to me.
Yeah.
And so I had VP on one side who
Mhm.
said, this is the way we're going to do this merge.
Mm.
VP on the other
Mhm.
said, no, we're going to do it this way because they said, look, we've got the customer,
Mhm.
we know the customer better than you do and vice versa. Right.
Mhm.
And so at the very beginning of that particular program, we were somewhat star-crossed because fight those two, I had to fight them together.
Mhm.
Right? And
Mhm.
then that allowed us to get kicked off. Well, and that sounds
Mhm.
like, hey, we solved the problem ahead of time. No, we just really sort of band-aided them together, come to find out.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
got into steerco meetings with me. They nodded their heads. They said, yeah, we'll cooperate. Wink,
Mhm.
wink, nudge, nudge. We got
Yeah.
kicked off. We began our program, and all of a sudden that agreement went away. They
Yeah.
were not cooperating. They went back to their respective turfs, if you will, so forth and so on. And
Mhm.
so probably within about a month of kickoff, the wheels came off the bus in a very dramatic way in the middle of a steerco meeting, right? It was myself and a few of my peers from the different organizations, and we were just doing our normal steerco business, and someone from the other, quote, other VP came in and said, we're stopping, we're not doing this because VP so and so said they're pulling out their product, they're pulling out their people, they're pulling out their cash, you name it, right?
Mhm.
So that happened. That is a real
Mhm.
thing. And that what I just alluded to there is what I'll call that decision matrix,
Mhm.
where
Yeah.
that particular VP had a decision to make, and he made a decision that was completely contrary to what we were trying to do. A flip side of that could be you need a decision to be made, and a decision is
Mhm.
not made. Or
Right.
what happened to me more recently is you have a situation where people don't know who owns the
Mhm.
decision, right? And people who don't live in that corporate fishbowl like you and I do, I think always think that look, if they're a VP, they're an SVP, they're a C-suite person, that they've always got all the answers. They know what to say, they know what to do. We know the truth, which is no. They know
No.
what they
Yep.
can prove with data. They know what their
Mhm.
teams tell them. They know what
Yep.
they can intuit from their own pattern recognition.
Yep.
But if they don't know what they own for whatever reason, that is
Mhm.
another situation we face way too often
Mhm.
in our worlds, as I think you can attest.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
true reality is most of the time they need someone like you or me to tell them what decision to make and the reason why that's the right decision. And sometimes you have to get them all in a room and say, "This is where we're at. This is what you have to do." And it's sometimes easier said than done in
yeah,
reality. Yeah.
very true. The one thing, I'll leave. I'm going to leave it with this because I'm sure we're going to unpack more and talk more. But
Mhm.
I call this the uh, strategic alignment playbook. And I say playbook as something of a nod to my old friend, the PMBOK, where I'm really talking about just a book of plays. What can you do when you find yourself in a situation? This is not from A to Z, do step one, step two, step three. This is telling another group of professionals, hey, you know your business, you know your work, you are as competent as I am, if not more. These are just
Mhm.
some things these are tricks I've learned over the years with nice fancy labels that help you
Mhm.
know how to get through this thing and be able to move on with your life or prevent it from happening or whatever. So I call them frameworks for lack of a better term, but these are by no means, this isn't agile. This isn't scrum. This isn't
Mhm.
anything. This isn't Kanban. This
Mhm.
isn't any kind of a set of prescriptions, right? This is just like a PMBOK, but only, with a different set of lenses.
Well, I think frameworks are good. I think we should actually talk about that a little bit because I think for both of us, we see a lot of information out there that's not necessarily wrong, but it's misleading or it's so nuanced that the information that's being put out there doesn't cover everything, and people are trying to treat it like something that you can fix with a cheat sheet or a checklist or something that's very simplistic. And I think the real answer is people need to learn to work from things like frameworks and outlines and basic structures. So I think looking at frameworks is actually really smart because it gives you the basic idea with that nuanced approach so that if there's a situation that doesn't directly fit into it, you have the opportunity to build on it instead of just saying, okay, it's always this, because it's almost never always this.
Almost never. Oh,
S
yeah, right.
yeah, right, it's
Yeah, no,
never
I know,
always
but you're right.
this.
You're right.
But
You're
you know
right.
what I'm saying? And I
I
see
do.
that a lot. I see people putting out these cheat sheets and these checklists that are like, sure, they're 80% correct, but but they require a lot of iteration. They require a lot of thought when, because sometimes that situation is not correct. 10% of the time, that might not be right. And your cheat sheet doesn't account for that. But a framework does,
And that
right?
catastrophic,
So,
that 10% could be catastrophic, right? That
right.
10% wherever it lands. Um, I
Right.
think
So
I'm
I'm
gonna.
wondering if you can walk us through how your framework works and what what that would do for somebody who was in a situation like that.
Yeah, I will, but I'm going to resist deep diving too much. Let me kind of give a,
That's fine.
I'll give a little, kind of a little, peek and walk
Give
down
a
like one
taste like I
path.
did.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And so the way I put this all together is I say, look, you've got a situation where in that control vein, I start with those frameworks that apply everywhere. When I say in every environment, every type of situation I've been in across the spectrum for the last many years doing what we do, uh, these are consistent. This is what happens and how you do things, whether you're in healthcare, you're in technology, or you're in SaaS, you're in construction. It doesn't matter. The same business problems persist. The same. I like to use the phrase 5-year-olds playing soccer. It's not. We're not herding cats. We're the coach for 5-year-olds playing soccer. This is what
Hmm.
we are, right? And
Maybe
so
you do. I
these
heard
things
cats.
these are yeah these things happen everywhere. So the whole idea is I start people off and I say, look, if you're trying to get your hand around your environment, let's start with what you know, and let's start with your experience, right? And again, we're just going to come at it from the level of me giving them, for lack of a better term, guidance, guardrails, a tactical or practical approach for them to go and remember to do the things they know how to do, right? I'm not giving them a checklist. You check off all 10, you win. Not that kind of thing. It's just reminding people, hey, you come into this with a set of experience and time under your belt and scars from being,
Yeah.
where I've been, right? This is just to remind you, give you something to trigger that. We do have situations where I'm going to have to provide them frameworks and provide them some things that, hey, the system fights back. You and I are familiar. Anybody who's
Hmm.
listening to this podcast is going to be familiar with times when the environment fights back, whether it's the
Yeah.
culture, it's the leadership, it's your peers, it's your customer, it's the board, it's the
Budget.
budget. You're right. It's whatever
Hmm.
it is. The
Hmm.
system will resist change.
Hmm.
And when the
Hmm.
system resists change, what do you do? And then lastly, let's be honest, I can give you, and I put in this recover aspect. I put in that field application part at the end by
Hmm.
acknowledging, hey, I can call them frameworks all day. I can tell you what works for me. I can tell you how to navigate in that hostile situation. But there are times when you just simply cannot overcome the environment, and you have to
Hmm.
make a decision at that point. how do I how do I continue to drive that program, that initiative, when I know that this particular problem is insurmountable? What do I do? This is politically sensitive. This could wind up being a career limiting move. It could be this, it could be that. Uh, that's where we often find ourselves. It's like, well, man, it's neat that Cale told me all these really cool things, but they don't mean crap now because I'm about to get fired for telling the truth.
Yeah.
Well,
That's a real concern.
you may very well get fired for telling the truth, and no Cales in the world can stop that. Uh, been there, done that. But it's one of those things where I want to acknowledge in this part of the framework. It's like I've been there. This is what I did. Uh, Not to help you. This is no get out of jail free card. But here's how you can work it, and you might be able to salvage the program. You might even have a situation like I've had in the past where you did everything you could to overcome that problem. You could not. You let your leaders know, and you can wind up getting promoted for doing everything you could to solve a problem that they realized you had no ability to solve, but you
Mhm.
demonstrated some other
Mhm.
behaviors, capabilities, whatever that gave you the opportunity to take the next step. And I found myself in situations like that once or twice. So anyway, uh, the the little sort of I'll pick what I call my favorites, and over here in these universal frameworks, if you will, where the bulk of the content is, for the most part. I talked to you a minute ago about pattern recognition and things like that. I want to talk about like the first two, what I call the courage and clarity framework. And the courage and clarity framework is, look, you at the very beginning of a program, there are already things or initiative, there are already things you have to get your hand around that could be wrong, could be
Right.
undecided, could be broken, even at the very beginning. You could have a situation where there are, let's say, my favorite scenario is there are 10 priorities in this organization, and we don't
Mhm.
have enough men, women, budget, time, anything else, permission to do 10
Mhm.
priorities all at once, right?
Mhm.
So one of the things that I say to folks is the reality is we've been there. You go into that situation getting your stakeholders to limit it to three. What are
Mhm.
the top three? And it's not saying you can't do the other seven at some point. Focus on those top three. Get them launched, get them kicked off, get them rolling. And then if you can get your
Mhm.
headway around them, let's go ahead and bring in the fourth one as that first one is rolling out, right? But people cannot concentrate and cannot be expected to deliver 10 priority items at once. It's just, I've never been in an organization where we could pull that off. We've tried,
No,
but
there's
you
no
never
way you
have enough,
can.
never, right? And
Mm-mm.
threes, for whatever reason, three seems to be the magic number, regardless of organization size. I'm not making that number up. I didn't pull it from an MBA book. This is just from practical lived experience. One of the other things I say to peers, and they've said to me, and I've said to people that I've managed, and again, these are truisms, and this goes for you as well, regardless of the kind of organization you're in. There are people that influence outcomes. There are people that influence those outcomes. You can see them influencing them.
Mhm.
And there are people who are sitting in what we call those shadow organizations who are influencing the outcome in ways you don't know. They're having hallway conversations. They're having conversations on the golf course with their buddy from way back. You name it. You have to get your hand around knowing who these people are and the influence they're going to have on your success. Okay.
Mhm.
And the other flip side of that is start building relationships and networking and influence with people way before you need it, right? If you're dealing with a shadow organization, get to the bottom of it and find out what the impact is. At the same time, I say this with tongue in cheek, make your own shadow organization. And by that, I
Yeah.
mean, in reality, have your own network of people who
Mhm.
are invested in the success of this particular initiative,
Mhm.
right? have that have that team. You've got to do this way in advance. You're not going to get a group of stakeholders signed off and holding hands and singing kumbaya the day this thing kicks off. It would have
Yeah.
had to have happened, well, a long time ago, building relationships, building credibility, again, telling you things
Mhm.
you know. So,
You're right, because if you don't, you're gonna have that shadow group come in and say, "Oh, by the way, we're not doing this anymore," and you're blindsided by it.
you know as well as I do, they already have that network built. They already have those relationships, and I don't mean to sound like there's this, it's not Darth Vader sitting over there, but
Mhm.
they've got what they need to be effective, or they wouldn't be that shadow organization in the first
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
So
Right.
on down the line, it's just one of those things where I just say, look, these are things we all run into, and these are things you can do quickly and easily, or not quickly, pardon me, quickly, not easily. Building relationships is not quick, but how do I say this? It's easier than a lot of things if you just do it. Um, I talked to you earlier at the beginning of this thing about knowing if you're drifting, right? So
Mhm.
as soon as the day the program kicks off, start looking for signs of drift. Start looking
Mhm.
to see if scope changes. See if you are not getting things done at the right time. See if there is, let's say it's a VP. I love picking on VPs in these situations because they're just at that high enough at that level to have some power and to have some visibility, but they
Yeah.
don't have all the answers. But they have
Mhm.
just enough power to really put things into churn and chaos
Yeah.
if they're not governed, right? If you will.
Right.
And so,
Right.
yeah. And so
From
one of the
both
phrases,
ends.
yeah, one of the phrases I use in the in the framework here is I call it sacred cow. So like you've
Uh-huh.
got that VP, let's say she
Mhm.
feels very strongly about that priority number four. You know, we said,
Mhm.
look, we can only do three. She's like, well, I'm holding on to my number four with grim death. You're not
Yeah.
killing my number four. Well, you figure out some way before the thing finally kicks off. You figure out some way to bargain with her, uh, and she's willing to put her fourth priority aside for 6 months. That's
Mhm.
the agreement. It's in the charter,
Uh-huh.
right? And
Right.
she's going to get something out of that deal. You know, you're horse trading.
Mhm.
Let's be honest,
Right.
right?
Right.
You're trading favors, you're trading resources, you're doing all sorts of things to get the priorities met. Well,
Mhm.
2 months later, let's say, all of a sudden that fourth priority shows up again in a conversation. And you're like, we killed that, right?
Mhm.
Charter says, the agreement says, hey, that got killed. Well, what you're seeing is her sacred cow pop back up,
Yep. Yep.
right? Okay. And you have to know that's going to happen, and you have to be able to deal with that sacred cow
Yeah.
situation. And we talk about that in that courage and clarity framework. You've got to
Mhm.
be able to have that conversation with that stakeholder, with that key decision maker, and say, VP so and so, we had an agreement. This sacred cow was dead.
Mhm.
Please help me understand why it's back and what you're willing to trade off out of these top three to keep it.
Right.
You have to take them back to that agreement and say, hey, if you're changing the terms on me, fine, but we're going to have to trade something else out. Which
Yeah.
of these three that you agreed to comes off the list so that sacred cow four can come back on,
Right.
right? It's a
Right.
horrible conversation to have. It's never fun. She will push hard for keeping all four. Thank you very much. She's,
Yep.
look, I'm going to go call your boss and tell your boss that you're being
Mhm.
uncooperative. You know, things like that happen. But
Go
that's where the
for it.
courage part comes in. That's where the
Yeah.
courage, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, you'll hear if the folks who are listening haven't fallen asleep yet, they're going to hear scar tissue. I like to call it.
Yeah.
You know,
We have
these
wounds.
scenarios, yeah, these scenarios I described to you, I'm not making these up. These are
No.
lived experience. So I'll
These
stop
are
there
real.
and see
Yeah.
these are real. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
say that to say because they're real, that's why I got them out and onto paper, if you will, because they're
Mhm.
real
Mhm.
and they have to be discussed and maybe someone can benefit, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Yeah. I think talking about the sacred cow in general when it comes to working as a professional is important anyway, not just when it comes to this, because there are a lot of sacred cows. There's, when it comes to this is how we've always done it. That's a sacred cow. A lot of
Absolutely.
people won't give that up. This person's been here forever. We can't replace them with automation. We can't train them to do anything else. They have to keep doing this manual thing, even if there's a better thing to do and they could be doing something else. That's a sacred cow. There's so many things that businesses hold sacred that they will not give up, that you cannot get them to get rid of. And I think it's important to be able to find a way to address those and overcome them, because sometimes they are the only thing or the biggest thing preventing you from getting over that hump or getting to the place where you are back on track.
Right. And I
And so I
want,
think it's important to really make sure that those are addressed.
yeah. Now keep in mind here too, and I feel like I need to say this explicitly, and I think you would agree. Um, there is no framework, there is no piece of paper, there is nothing that says, as a program manager, as an operations director, or anything else, that you are going to be successful every time. It's it's not even a one person responsibility. But
No.
if you are in the situation where we are most of the time in those roles we were just discussing, you are responsible for delivery. You're not
Mhm.
responsible for a lot of the other things that brought that delivery to your door, but you're
Mhm.
responsible for delivery. And you
Yeah.
have to be able to have those courageous conversations, bring clarity.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean you're going to get your way. It doesn't mean you're going to win all the time. It doesn't even mean that it's going to necessarily wind up going the direction it needs to. But you've done
Mhm.
your job because you've done
Yeah.
everything you can do
Mhm.
to keep the thing going, to call
Right.
out deltas, to
Mhm.
be courageous and speak truth to power.
Mhm.
I'm not here to say it's a utopia. It's not. But how many people do you and I know who won't even do that much? They will sit and they'll sit and
Mhm.
let the fate happen to them and to their
Yeah.
program because they won't have that managerial courage, or they
Mhm.
won't seek the clarity, or they
Mhm.
won't know that they've got to look for patterns, so forth
Yeah.
and so on. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, because it's easier than dealing with the potential fallout. And by fallout, I mean making VP you know who mad, or you know or having to do more work,
Mm,
right?
yeah. Go
They
along to
like
get along.
coasting.
Yeah.
Right. They like coasting and they like everybody getting along, so rather than make waves, they just keep their mouth shut and they just keep on going. And it, that's not always the best way to go, but there are a lot of people that it's just easier. And so that's what they
Right.
do.
Right.
And you and I
So. mm,
don't generally do things just to make life easier. It's just
No,
not the way we
no,
operate.
we kind of also we don't even do it on purpose all the time, but it
No.
winds up being harder. Now, let me give the ball back to you, to take the conversation where you'd like. Uh, I think the last thing I'll say about the frameworks here specifically is, again, these are ways to help people have something to bounce their own brains against and have something to refer to that always speaks to lived experience and speaks to something that if they look at it they're familiar with it, or they're like, wow, I really could use that right now, and I'll
Hmm.
try that, and I know it's there for me. Um, we could talk in a moment about, ideal customers and how I
Yeah.
intend to get this to them and things of that nature. But that is the core of what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Similar to what you're doing with
Hmm.
ROI that works.
Yeah.
That same, you saw some pain, you lived that pain, you're done being scarred,
Hmm.
and you'd like to prevent other people from having the experience you've had.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I was going to go. So let's talk about, your customers. Who's your ideal customer? Who are you trying to help? Who could benefit from this?
Great question. I'm trying to help, and I may not get myself to the right place in my page that keeps changing. What I'll call my ideal customers or my target customers, the folks that I want to help, are really going to be in two camps. They're going to be, the first camp is those folks that, again, they've got a certain amount of responsibility. They're in that hot seat for delivery, but for whatever reason they don't have all the things they need. They don't have the tools, the techniques, the experience, whatever. And they just need somebody to come in and provide them that clarity to get unstuck. And whether it's handing them that playbook and offering them uh, situations, offering them time where I can meet with them an hour a week for 6 weeks and we can go through it together, and I can teach it to them and help them understand how to implement it. That's one type of customer, where I literally bring them through and remind them how to do this. Uh, there's a corollary to that same person who they find themselves in a situation today where, hey, they'll benefit from that strategic alignment playbook, but they also find themselves, let's say they want to make that next step from middle management to director, right? That lower rung of the executive status, if you almost said branch, director level, right?
Still in the Air
Uh,
Force, Cale.
I know, I'm sorry. Uh, I've got a pathway, if you will, that helps them understand how to navigate from that middle manager, senior manager level to the next step, to director. What do they need to do? How do they need to get there? what are the secrets and tricks? There are no secrets. There are no tricks. It's just it's just work is the answer. But a lot of folks don't know what that work is. And having navigated that journey two or three times myself up and down, up and down the chain, I've got the pattern captured, right? And I can help people make that leap. Uh, the other thing that I like to do is, as you know from living with me for so many years, I like to teach. I like to bring knowledge to as many people as possible. And so the other ideal customer for me is going to be that VP, is going to be that SVP or that senior director or even the COO who says, look, I saw you on LinkedIn. I saw this thought leadership. I saw the practical nature. I saw the proof, the scars. I would love for you to come in and do, like, say, 3 days of training for 100 of my people. And I would love for you to take us through the strategy alignment playbook, for example. Let's get us from here to there. Let's do 100 people. Let's do it all, all at once, on site, virtual, remote, whatever. I can bring that knowledge and that scar tissue benefit to more people. And so it's that leader, it's that senior leader, that executive leader that says, man, we really want to try to get some of this into our DNA, right? So it's that same vein. Um, and so those are my customers. It's the people who they need the knowledge and they would either like to do it themselves and just learn it, like some of us are autodidactic. Others, they want to have someone like me kind of coach them through it, or they want to get to the next level or what have you. And then finally, again, they want to have mass impact on their organization so that that COO says, look, six
Mhm.
months from now, we're not going to go through this set of pain again. The next time when we start planning the second half of the year or we start planning the first half of FY27 or whatever it is we're doing, we're
Mhm.
not going to make these same mistakes again because we are taking these learned lessons and we're applying them to our organization,
Mhm.
and we'll just make whole different mistakes later, but not these, right? There's that incentive, as well as I do, having, being a leader with a large organization or being the person who is asked to go and take that training. There is a lot of power and a lot of information that you can take away from that and use there and carry it with you on into the future as well. I want to fill that need, and I want to do it in a way that's not like the big four where you come in with five guys and they come in wearing their power suits and they just bam 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 bam, right?
Right.
I bring
And they
it
tear you
in,
down.
it's and they tear you down. This isn't
Yeah.
basic training. I
Mhm.
want to come in and share these things with you tactically. I call it tactical and practical, right? We're just having a conversation, and I just happen to be the one sharing the information, and then we talk about how to apply it, that practical aspect.
Mhm.
It's almost like they were sitting in one of my college courses, but it's just many more students at once,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, I guess so speaking of your college courses, so that actually kind of leads me down the path of so talk about teaching. So I know you teach and you mentor, and that's part of this piece.
Hmm.
And you sort of alluded to and talked a little bit about what that looks like. If somebody's doing this, what are they getting from you? Let's just say they need one-on-one. How does that work?
Yeah. The way it works is, and I appreciate you asking. I would start them with what I call that signal check, and I'm playing with how that's going to be charged or how I'm going to uh, frame that all out. But that signal check is me getting on the phone or that person getting on the phone with me for 30 minutes, and I've got a guided conversation I have with them that says basically, let's talk about what you're dealing with right now, whether it's that strategic alignment playbook scope type thing, or you are looking for that next step in your career in management levels of this thing. Let's find out what you need, uh, where you're stuck, right? Uh, and then we talk about over like a 6 week period, and 6 weeks seems to be the sweet spot of where we go through this much information. I can keep their attention. Give, we can get information to a person, have them taught, and have them be able to apply it without losing them 7, 8, 10, 12 weeks, or trying to cram 15 years of knowledge into their brain in 2 weeks, right?
Mhm.
6 weeks, an hour a week, if you will, is the magic formula I've seen for doing that. And so they're going to meet with me an hour a week for 6 weeks. We're going to go through that, what I call that bespoke or that tailored training opportunity for them where they are getting pieces of if they only need parts of the playbook, that's what we'll cover. And then we'll cover other parts of leadership. I want to bring those elements to them and let them in some ways choose from pieces if that's how they need to do it, if that's what they
Mhm.
want to learn, or we can go through the entire SAP, whatever the case may be. It all starts with that. I call that signal check. Everything has to have a name. So I just basically say, where are you? Where do you feel like I can help you get unstuck?
Yeah.
Right. And
Similar
we
to
call
my
that the
audit,
signal
so
check.
yeah.
It's exactly right. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like instead of walking them through a thing where we're checking and we're counting up the number of credits or debits that they've got in that checklist, it's having a human conversation and saying, okay, I get you. Let me tell you how I can help you. And here's how I've done this
Yeah.
before. Right.
Yeah.
And they sign up with me, if you will, and we start marching together toward them overcoming this situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can kind of hear between the two of us how we approach things just a little bit differently. We have very similar thoughts and very similar ideas, but we approach things very differently. Cale goes in very much with the let's get a feel for this. Let's see where they're at. Let's pick this person's brain and see what they're feeling, what they're thinking. And I'm very much data, data, data.
Yeah. Right. Right.
But in
Yeah.
reality, I need the data to make an informed decision. It's not that the conversation won't be there; it will. But it's really funny how you're going after um, you're making your decision on what they need based on what you're getting and feedback from a phone call. That's how you're checking to see what they're going to need and building your plan around that. And my plan is built around what are your days in AR? What's your denial rate? What's your revenue? Where are you at from a financial perspective? Because I need that data to decide where your gaps are. And I'm making my decisions almost entirely on data.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I know exactly what you're saying, and I'm true
Hmm.
in truth and not disagreeing with you. I would
Yeah,
just sort of flippantly
it's
say
funny.
that that signal check that I refer to, I
Mhm.
am gathering data.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
I'm not gathering it in a spreadsheet. We're not doing trend analysis. We're not doing days in
yeah,
AR. We're not doing,
yeah,
black line, red line, or but it's data. It's a signal,
yeah. Yes.
but you're right. It's a different dynamic and a different
Hmm.
way, I think, ultimately of working towards solving the same
Yeah.
kinds of problems.
Hmm.
I'll give a shout out to our friend and colleague Karan,
Yes.
who,
Hi, Corinne.
uh, yeah, hi, who is telling us, and we'll put maybe in our show notes, we'll put a link to her, to the things that she does well, the things she's putting out in the universe, her business and her problems that she's trying to solve with data, by the way. Uh,
Definitely check out her website. It's awesome.
Yep. And rather than try to spell it out, and we'll say it's data brain, and again we'll provide the link. She said to you and me independently and together, you two are doing a lot of the same work, and you're doing it independently.
Hmm.
And why? Right? And she didn't put it quite so. She a little bit more stark, than that. But
Yeah.
she's right. And so it goes back down to, again, you and I together, this is by way of trying to bring this podcast home for the day.
Yes. Yeah.
We've got this podcast out here because we realized through feedback from Koran, through feedback from our friend Chris and many others, that there is something to discuss here, right? Whether it's good naturedly how we approach data gathering to define and solve a problem, to build a plan, if it's the problems we're trying to solve in our particular verticals or horizontals, right? Uh, at the end of the day, we found out, again, like we like to say, we sit 20 feet apart and we were doing the same jobs
Yeah.
for different domains, different enterprises. And so many times, if we had been smart, we could have talked about it. We could have
Yeah.
bounced ideas off one another. We could have shared, who knows, right? But we didn't do that. So now here we are saying, hey, we're going to boost each other. We're going to support one another in this podcast thing. And who knows in the future, our two problem solving businesses may wind up morphing together in some way you and I can't
Yeah.
yet determine.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
I'm
So
absolutely
who
certain
knows?
there's
Yeah.
somebody out there who could use both of us.
Yeah.
Certain of it.
Yeah. And I think it's a situation where not to prognosticate too much, but that person could be someone, let's say, in that revenue cycle management leadership position, where
Mhm.
she's got a staff of people whose job it is to get that revenue recognized, get it in the system,
Mhm.
get their physicians paid or their providers paid, right?
Right.
So she's sitting there at that operations level, that delivery level, that director level, and she's got OKR, she's got numbers to hit. And these
Yeah.
men and women down at that pointy end of the sphere level are blocked.
Right.
And so she comes to you and
Mhm.
you give her the keys to the kingdom on how to get these folks unblocked,
Yep.
right? She
Yep.
says, well, he says, man, that Mindy, you just saved my life. I wish
Mhm.
I knew how to prevent this kind of thing from happening again in the future. Or I wish I knew how to take the next step and really get my leadership to listen to me.
Mm.
You're
Well,
like, well,
I'll bring it back around to your sacred
yeah,
cow
right.
and say most of the time the reason why they're blocked is because of a sacred cow.
Sacred cow. Yeah.
So
Well, yeah,
absolutely, we could come right back to, hey, let's get one of your frameworks in place and align it with some of my workflow, and they they would be in a much better position than they were than when they started.
that's right. And not only would that be the case, they would be able to then say, look, they've overcome that barrier. And if it's, getting past denials, what you teach them and give the tools for them how to do, they are not going to be blocked by that particular denial barrier again.
Mhm.
They've
Right.
got the path that works, quote, every time until
Mhm.
the data changes or the
Right.
rules change. And you
Sure.
do keep up with that, by the way.
Right. Yes,
Uh,
policy
yeah,
changes. Hello.
policy changes. And I think the last thing I'll say about the framework and this kind of thing here, I'm on version 3.6 since January. I started capturing this out of my head and onto paper, if you will, sitting in Maine. You may recall sitting there
Mhm.
during Christmas break,
Yeah.
in a little cabin in Maine. Sounds sexier than it is. It's a nice space, but it's a bit on the blue collar side. And we're sitting there having Christmas and relaxing. And this stuff just starts
You
all
might have
coming
been
out.
relaxing. I was sick.
But you know what I mean? Yeah, I was sitting at that dining room table thinking about loss and thinking about job and Christmas and all that heavy stuff that hits you at that time of year. And this kind
Mhm.
of stuff just started pouring out of my head. And it's like, oh man, I better get this down.
Mhm.
It wasn't the next great American novel because I can't seem to write
Mhm.
that, but this just came out. And my friend Claude helped me get it into something that was human
Mhm.
readable and made some sense from A to Z.
Mm. Mhm.
And I've spent the last 6 8 months refining this, talking with customers, talking with would be customers, peers, you, uh,
Mhm.
really refining this thing. And again, I'm up to version 3.6. And I say that to say whether it's your ROI that works, it's your uh, denial codes and all the libraries and all the things that you've got. Those are constantly being kept up to date and tied to the latest data, to the
Mhm.
latest rules, the latest uh,
Mhm.
right governance, if you will.
Right.
Same thing here. The framework is going to continue to evolve, right? As I run into new situations or my customers tell me about situations where, you know what, that doesn't work very well. You might think it does, but we're going to go in and tweak that. And so whether I'm training you on it or you come to some kind of a quote school situation, SKOOL, me setting up a school for it, you're going to get up to date information too, right? uh, because things never stand still.
They don't. No.
Yep. All right.
Yep.
So maybe
Okay.
you want to make us stop talking. You want to?
Yep, let's wrap there.
All
I
right.
think I
Yeah.
think we've covered
Yeah.
we've covered a lot of ground today. So we will put links and everything in the show notes for anybody who wants to reach out to contact us. Both of us are available for consultations. If anybody wants just to get some time on our calendars to chat, talk about anything that you need help with, I'll post our website links and links to all of our socials. So reach out if you have any questions. Feel free to just let us know anything that you need help with. We're here. And watch us on YouTube. We'll be on YouTube. We'll be on Amazon. I'm sorry, not Amazon, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Music,
TikTok.
and TikTok. And we will talk to you on the next episode, episode 3.
Okay.
All
Yes.
right.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks, everybody. You have to turn it off.
That's what I'm trying to do. And stop.